Okay, welcome back from lunch, everyone. Um, we're now going to cover the results of the board engagement survey. Okay, so a little background. Um, December December board meeting, Brian Moreno, one of our new members, suggested a survey to help identify the challenges associated with the HAB culture from the new member person perspective. And he offered to develop a survey, and so he did, and Mia and I worked with him on it, and we briefed it through the ESC, and then we published it out to the board members as a whole. 11 people responded, which is not necessarily a bad number for anybody that is used to dealing with surveys. Yes, there's always opportunities for improvement, but we did get response from 11 people. What I'm going to do is brief out. Well, you all received the results of the survey and the survey report that Brian put together. So you have the background information if you so choose. But the board survey report, or the board survey synopsis, thank you. The report provided a high-level analysis of the themes that emerged from the survey. And to be clear, Brian did the report. Brian has an extensive background in organizational management, and this is his bailiwick. Unfortunately, he has a different board meeting this week that he had to be at. So me and I are going to try our best to pass on what he passed on to us. But understand, this is not our area of expertise. The overarching theme was the need for clarity. And as we go through it, there you will see what he means by clarity. But clarity can be achieved in 4 operational opportunity areas: structure, the rules of the game, recognition, and identity. The report does not delve into recommendations or specific tactics to address the opportunity areas. That's the next step. Those ideas ought to come from the people in the room who decide what solutions would be most meaningful for the group. That's us. So, clarity. Sources of conflict appear most when individuals in the group lack clarity. This muddiness stifles creativity, raises tension between individuals, and limits how far each person is willing to put themselves out there with ideas, recommendations, or elevating barriers to discuss. All right. From my perspective, I had to go back to Brian and say, what do you mean by clarity? And that's why we've got his definition. When there's absolute clarity, there is no gray area preventing anyone from being able to perform to the best of their abilities. We do an exercise with groups where participants sit back to back, one with a simple drawing of an object, while their partner has paper and pen. The person with the picture has to explain to their partner how to draw without using obvious words like draw an arm or put food in the middle. How do I? The question is, can we both get to a point in our relationship where we can draw the same picture? If we ask the board, what's the roles of the HAB member, or what do we need to create the best advice? Can we all draw the same picture? If not, we don't have clarity. Values, cohesiveness, trust, structure, rules and norms. There's a word behind there.
All
Pardon?
things.
Thank you. These things, all these things play a role in creating organizational clarity. Okay, structure, the second component. This refers to technical components such as roles, meeting cadence, agendas, breakout session or versus group discussions, and culture. So next, rules of the game. Groups can only go as far as the individual members are willing to extend themselves. If members do not know where they can push for innovation and be creative, the group never pushes itself. This limits growth and contributions. Recognition. All right. This does not mean celebration or personal accomplishments. What is referred to is clarity, being able to easily recognize something in key areas such as mission progress, value of contributions, and the overarching value proposition of the HAB. Identity. All right, trust includes three components: knowledge, which is our experiences with one another; calculus, the individual rules we all have internally, such as communication or leadership style; identity, what we know about a person's experience, skills, strengths, and personality. Conflict arises when two individuals have differing ideas. The better we understand those differences and learn to value them, the higher performing we become as a group. Yeah, all right. Now I threw all that stuff at you. Here's the conclusions. The report is intended to give direction and language around how the board can take meaningful action to deepen cohesion and reduce sources of unhealthy conflict. It is not meant to be a one size fits all or a silver bullet. The work becomes the responsibility of the board, the executive committee, and potentially an issue manager team. The solutions exist within the people in this room and online, and next steps are for those people to determine what works for all members of the HAB. So I'm going to now open it up for conversation. Like I said, me and I are not the experts, but we have talked to Brian. The next step to me is, do we want to take the results of the survey and do something with them? Form a team and try and brainstorm opportunities for the HAB as a whole to improve its culture so that we all can come away with the same understanding of what our roles are and how we do our job, AKA clarity.
Jeff, your thoughts?
Sorry, I don't think the sample size is large enough. 11 seats out of how many?
Well, we have 38 seats on the board, and 30 of them have alternates, but that's not the actual number of bodies.
Okay,
So-
so roughly 50 people, so we had a 20% response rate. So I would suggest that we do it again and make it very clear to all members and alternates that the expectation is that they take the survey. We need their input.
Would it be beneficial to have paper copies of the survey at the end of a committee meeting or a board meeting so folks have the opportunity to fill it out while they're in the room?
Sure. And I think the facilitation team, you know, could, there's ways to do blind surveys and yet keep track and make sure that number 9, for example, submitted his survey or something. But the expectation should be that people actually participate and not stand back as spectators. So I'm not sure how you could keep track of that and follow up with people that haven't submitted the surveys. There's got to be ways to do that.
Chris?
Of those 11 responses back, actually there were 9 because 2 of them only answered 2 of the 11 questions. So for all intents and purposes, there were 9 surveys that answered almost all of them. 4 of those, they skipped a couple. So the participation was actually less than on face value. Second, to me, it seemed like the summary and a lot of the words that appeared in these slides are words that appear in Six Sigma exercise or Kaizen exercise. Kaizen is kind of a mini Six Sigma. Those are the kind of words you hear when you go through one of these exercises. And those are intensive exercises with can be broad participation, but typically can go over a week or so. And therefore, organizations that are committed, that management has already pre-committed to address the results of the Kaizen or Six Sigma exercise. That's not us. I think if we go forward with this, and I've mentioned this to Sue a couple of times, we ought to have that reinitiate that operations work group again. And the context in which we worked 2 years ago addressed many of these same things. There wasn't a whole lot here that we didn't address in that work group. So maybe if we do this exercise again and come out, then maybe that can be feedback into another operations work group. That's what I think.
Dan.
Just a comment to Lindsay's suggestion. I would guess that of those 11 or 9 people, that they're all in this room. The people who show up are the ones who filled out the survey. So handing out paper copies in a meeting where you didn't show up isn't gonna, I mean, a good suggestion, mind you, but a lot of HAB members are no-shows, isn't that right? I mean, so that's just my comment.
Rob.
I don't think we really, consider the fact that we meet infrequently and we're not permanent employees and we have a term limit, that the long-term lessons from surveys like these need to be very simple and straightforward, and not complex at all. And many of the solutions that this method is offering is, as Chris says, quite detailed and very formalized. Anyway, I think that we do have time in front of our meetings, every meeting that we have, to refresh a few of those value statements and the things that we keep important, and guide us to the fact that we need to allow that we repeat our values in every advice that we offer. And that's what our board is we're made of people that have shared values, and the projects that DOE does is implementing or working with to get those on that scope. So anyway, I'm kind of getting tongue tied there, but I don't want to put too much effort in this. I don't mind surveys. I think they're really good for kind of, hey, what do we do? 11, 9, that's all important stuff for us. I think maybe a survey a year would be helpful. I think you start after you get 1 or 2 years of it, you might be able to see some trends that may indicate a problem coming up or something. But like I said, not too much time on this. I don't mind taking the surveys.
Chris.
Yeah. One other thing too, I don't think that the HAB members in their entirety, plus alternates, all 60 some or whatever, I don't think they necessarily have shared values. I don't think we want people to have shared values. I think we're too diverse, people coming from too many backgrounds, maybe too many cultural differences, too many everything. And I think has been voiced a number of times, that's one of the benefits of a diverse group, is you get a lot of different viewpoints. The hard part is getting consensus when you have that. But I think trying to get a common this, common that, common whatever, maybe with the exception of a whole bunch of interests like that, which I don't think we want to go there. If we do, then I think we're going to lack input and a variety of ideas into the problems that we're trying to solve.
Allow me to debate that for a second.
Sure.
I believe values are very simple and direct statements. Remove, treat, and dispose. We don't need to put a whole bunch of caveats behind it. Store the waste in the safest place possible. To be conscious of our workers and safety. Those are fundamental values. I've never heard anybody in this body ever say they don't share those. I mean, we have published them, we share those values. If we start adding caveats on, oh, well, we want that value there, but we don't want it here. Well, that's not a value. The value is constant. And I think we've listed about 12 values, 13 values for the board since 2007, 2008, 2010, we came up with the RTD. So, I mean, these are longstanding values with the board. And I'd like to see our advice start referencing them a little bit more maybe, because they're important. Thank you.
We have 4 in queue. We'll start with Chuck.
I was at the December meeting when this came up, and I think I was part of the problem. Because my point was our level of engagement is so different from each other. I mean, Amber's a county commissioner for Spokane. I'm the mayor pro tem of Kennewick. I look at Chris, his technical knowledge is so much higher than mine. And I worked out there for 34 years. And I mean, I was great in PPE and duct tape, and that was the extent of my knowledge. But that we have such a disparate level of engagement, of technical knowledge, of so on and so forth. Everybody cares, but also we have different agendas. I will tell you up front, I tend to be a fanboy of Department of Energy as they're operating today, having been out there since '77. So I've seen DOE at its worst and I've seen it at its best, and this is one of the better sites. So, I push back against perfection. I will accept good enough. I think this type of exercise, it's good to do at the level of engagement where the executive team is, where the leads of the various subcommittees are, because they're the ones most engaged. You will show the leadership. And quite honestly, I mean, I'll show up. I will do the best homework I can. But if it's a choice between being here and being at interview for a new city manager, this loses out immediately. I mean, it's not even a hard thought, right? My city responsibilities come before this. A lot of things come before this. It has to be that way. Now, that's crap. And I'm sorry for that, but that is the reality. People who have the time and the flexibility of the energy levels to be here and as engaged as you and Maya are, that's great. And I'm all for you. I will follow. But I don't want, I mean, and this will sound terrible, HAB has the reputation of a time suck. That's highly technical words for you're going to spend all day sitting on your butt. You'll get something out of it, but was it worth the exercise of sitting there all day? And that can be kind of iffy. In 23, one piece of advice came out. That was sad. I mean, for as many hours as people spent, carrying hours, people really impassioned, but one piece of advice came out. That was it. So I think we have to kind of moderate how functional do you think this group is going to get? And I guess my sensibility is it will be impactful to the bureaucracies that exist to some degree, but this is not my life. I'm not sure where I'm going with this. This could explain why I only have 6 constituents. So I will shut up now.
Rob Parmalee.
My comments are directed towards the structure of the survey. I've developed a number of surveys, and it's a challenge to get anything out of a survey if every question is an essay type question. you get better results in a survey if you have choices to make in a question, and then you can develop a curve that says, oh, these are high, these are this and this and this, so that you can get some commonality between all of uh, the people that take the survey. So that's just my comment.
Mia?
I just wanted to share back because Susan and I met with Brian before going to Ohio, and just to kind of get his explanation on the results and the report that he wrote up. And he wasn't surprised by the low number of people that responded to the survey. He thought that even from the responses that were received, he could glean a good idea of what the board thinks. And he said that the survey responses put words to what he was noticing in the room. And so after I read his report, my first question was, well, how do we act on all of this information? How do we kind of do something, change things? And he was willing to give a few ideas for how to improve, but also talked about how it needs to come from the board and the agencies working together and kind of coming up with actions. And so he recommended establishing a team to identify the action items. And he said that he'd be willing to be looped into that discussion. And then that team could report out on the findings and maybe start incorporating things into meetings. And some of the suggestions he gave were very simple in terms of starting off a meeting by asking very random, silly questions that help us get to know one another, like who, dead or alive, would you invite to dinner? And just kind of have that opening, just icebreaker type of a question incorporated into some of the meetings so we have a chance to get to know one another, and that may address identity and get into these other areas of the results that he put together. So I just wanted to share some of that conversation.
And Jeff?
So picking up on what Chuck and Rob Parmalee said, one of the questions is why don't people participate? And having check a box or multiple boxes as in it's too far to drive, takes too much time, the workload, would give us a sense of why and how people don't participate more. So that would be the type of question I think we'd like the answer to in a format like Rob suggested that would give us some data that we could take some actions on. And then the second is a question for DOE. In the appointment process, do you attempt to impose some expectations on the candidates so that if they do apply for and accept an appointment, that the expectation is they're going to devote so much time and effort to the board?
So you are all volunteers, so we don't outline specific expectations for a certain number of hours that people are there to donate. They're able to participate as much or as little as they can.
Rob?
Just to tack on to what I was talking about earlier, the longer it takes for a person to think he's going to complete the survey, the less responses you get, which means that if you have all of these essay type questions you want to ask her, it's going to drive fewer people to complete the survey. And that's just from experience.
Chris?
Here's another way we might get at some of the same issues or questions. 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, something like that, at a board meeting, which there were a lot of people at. Ruth Nicholson, who was the facilitator at that time, asked everybody at the table and online, what is the biggest concern that you have concerning Hanford? Or something like that. Okay, and she got one or more responses from everybody. So she had over 100 responses. Now, she did a really good job of binning those responses into about 8 or 9 bins. And she sent them out. And I looked at those and I thought, you know, you could write a policy issue advice on probably 6 to 7 of those 8 or 9 bins. And those would make a really good advice topic for one of the teams. And a couple of those bins addressed some of the same things here. They didn't have to do technically with remediation at Hanford or anything like that. They dealt with some of the issues here. But I thought those would be good advice topics. So I took her table and her bins and wrote out a suggested policy statement advice, 1 or 2 sentences that I thought each of those bins could be. And I sent it in to the then president or the head of the Sue's person before Sue, and he blew it off that no, we're not going to do anything like that. But I still think if we did try to do that again, got a lot of people said, what are your biggest concerns? They don't have to be about remediation. They can be about the HAB or how the HAB interacts with the tri-party agencies or remediation at Hanford. Get those, bin them, and see if they're amenable to some type of policy advice or to something that we could handle ourselves that had to do with ground rules or just how the HAB does its work.
Any other thoughts or perspectives to share on the survey? Chuck?
I really like what Chris just said because that lays out what our concerns are in a cognizant way and also gives direction to the board. And for a board that meets 3 times a year, you know, you can't expect razor's edge. We are laser focused on specific things. It's going to be Jello, and you're going to have the 5 bowls of Jello, whatever they are. But I mean, I can list what my concerns at Hanford are, really easy peasy. And I think everybody here, excuse me, can do the same. You know, it can be worker safety, it can be river protection, it can be land, how that's going to be used. A lot of these things, we have our personal agendas, and this would be an opportunity. And maybe that would be an agenda item for our next meeting is, you know, or even a survey that just says, what are your 4 or 5 top concerns?
Okay. Further comments? All right. Go.
Abraham Lincoln, that's who I'd like to have dinner with.
We'll record that for the next session. Okay, so with the thoughts and perspectives we heard, what should the next steps for the survey be?
I'd say repeat it next year. Or maybe make it a standard thing at the outgoing month in September, when the ones are going out to be their final survey, they can be honest.
Is this a topic that an issue manager team wants to take the lead on?
While we discuss that, Amber, would you like to share your comment?
Well, I was just going to say that I guess I would appreciate that maybe I don't know if it's the leadership of the HAB or an individual person that can rally folks. But to me, I think maybe there's some practical things that we could do to develop more relationships and break down some of the barriers around all of our ability to participate more or less, or our knowledge levels. And I do appreciate that the last couple of meetings we've tried to have little socials or meet and greets and things like that. I think do start to get people to get to know each other and build relationships. So maybe there's a group that could bring back some ideas of some practical things we could do to encourage engagement, encourage participation, keep the meetings interesting and moving and, focused, and also like some of that building relationship piece. So whether it's, talking about who do you want to have dinner with, or what have you, but I just think there's probably some practical things we can get out of, even though, there wasn't a lot of people that filled out the survey. I think we can learn a little bit and just think about some practical next steps. So I don't know who wants to take that on, but I'd be willing to participate in a little group if I don't want to be a team leader though.
Okay, so we'll hear from Larry, and then Tom has a recommendation of who that group might consist of.
I don't like taking surveys. So when I got the survey and started to fill it out, I would have rather have been somewhere else than reading the survey and responding to it. So and there's got to be other people like me that just really hate surveys. I'd rather be bird watching. So I agree with the recommendation that maybe at least a portion of it should be multiple choice or some choices or some write-ins. I think that the written response is valuable because it can put your perspective into a question, and so I'd like to see a little bit of both. As far as people not responding, I think that maybe it would be the responsibility of somebody on the board, Susan or somebody, to contact agencies that have people on the board and encourage them to have their member attend meetings. And maybe that would increase the attendance a little bit. I don't know how to make people come to meetings if there's no interest in it.
Tom, and then Chris. Go ahead, Tom.
I believe it's actually DOE's responsibility to reach out to the nominating authorities if someone's not showing up. But I think this would be a good idea for maybe COE, maybe the ESC to talk about. And anecdotally, as far as mixers go, I was just in a conference a couple weeks ago, and the first night they had a mixer that had sort of a combination trivia karaoke night using the audiovisual equipment in the room that is already reserved. So, it went well. I'm always a karaoke fan though.
I could sing one of my old rugby songs.
I'd pay
No.
money to see that.
Chris, did you have another comment with your tent up?
I think that in this meeting here, we've had a couple pretty good open conversations. There's this one. We had one about Jeff's letter. If you go back to past meetings, there was quite spirited conversation about the role of alternates. Go back before that, there was even more spirited conversation about term limits. But I think at those conversations, a lot of things came out that maybe normally would never have come out. So I think to the extent that maybe at every board meeting, we could have some type of open conversation about something, I think we'd get to know each other a little better. I think things would come out of the woodwork maybe that normally wouldn't come out of the woodwork. Just a thought. But this has been a good conversation. And one earlier, Jeff's letter was a good conversation. There's been a couple good conversations and a lot of participation.
Jacob, and then Brisa.
So Chris, what you said was really good, but
And one reason I really like committee meetings better than this meeting is because there's so much less people at them. And this is an unusually small full board meeting. When I first came, all of these seats would have been full, right? And there would be a whole slew of alternates running around. And, so this just has a much more comfortable feel. So I don't know, maybe the board's too big. But one of the things I've thought is you look at some of the things that maybe are indicators there's something wrong with the board, like not a lot of advice coming out and some things like that. Some of those that might motivate this. Some of those are related to the circumstances that we are in. We were in COVID for a while and that kind of shut everything down. We meet a lot less than we used to. You talk about a time suck, but I've noticed that the amount of when we had a lot more meetings, the amount we accomplished per hour was higher than we've had less meetings, because you end up having these conversations spread over a year and there's not a lot of momentum to them. The other thing is, at least on the tank waste half of the Hanford site, this holistic negotiation is shut down. We had 4 years of we can't talk about any of the important subjects. And now that that's done, perhaps that half of the Hanford mission is going to be a lot more ripe to discuss in the board, and we'll still have all the problems that the survey is helping to weed out, and we'll still have all of that. But I think you're going to see a lot more of the good things that come out now that holistic negotiations are done. That's just sort of my whole take on the whole thing.
Risa?
Well, I'm like Larry. I'm not much of a survey person, but I think we owe it to the individuals that took the time to actually complete a survey. And although it was sent to all of us and we all had the equal opportunity to respond to it and chose not to because there was very few, I think we just go with what we have. And my recommendation would be to just maybe this is the start of something and work with what we have now, bring something back to this full board, but start it at a much smaller group and see what comes out of that. Because yeah, in a larger group, you're not going to get much done. And again, I just think we owe it to those folks who took the time.
All right, so we've got 5 minutes left to identify our next step.
Josh, I'd like to hear from those board members that haven't spoken. I'm going to put them on the spot just because I want to hear everybody's thoughts. I want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to say something and provide some input.
In the room, I think that's just Rebecca. Would you like to say something or would you like to pass?
Okay.
And the line, we have Michelle. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I apologize. I had to jump off for a minute for a conflicting meeting. I believe we're giving feedback on the survey. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're determining the next step based on the survey report.
I don't know that I have some specific feedback about what the next step would be. I would say that I am one of those individuals that I logged in to answer the survey questions more than once. And I found myself struggling to provide a tactful response to the questions. And ended up not ever fully submitting a response. So I do agree that there's probably a lot of things that are affecting overall engagement. And I know I've been pretty vocal about some of them. So I think more conversation is probably needed if there's a means to do that.
And Simone, do you have anything to share?
I do not, but I tend to agree with what someone said earlier, that we should honor the 11 people who filled out the survey, and everyone did have an opportunity to
fill it out and chose not to. So to move forward with the results of that makes sense to me. Thank you.
So last week at the EMSSAB chairs meeting, the facilitator went around the table and asked all of the different chairs, what does a successful board meeting look like to you? And there was one answer when I was sitting there listening that stuck out to me. And it was a gentleman that was a chair on another board. And he shared that it's not bringing forward a recommendation and everyone saying, yes, I agree, and it moving forward. It's the conversation around that recommendation or the conversation in the room. And it may be beneficial for us to add that roundtable question at the next board meeting. What does a successful board meeting look like to you? Get everybody's feedback and then start planning. Any thoughts on that? Mia, Susan? HAB leadership?
Becky? Look like you.
Okay, I won't be silent anymore. Okay, yeah, I like that idea. I think that maybe sets some groundwork for, yeah, the next steps that we can actually have something tangible to work with from then. And hopefully then, yeah, the facilitation team can kind of put all of those responses together and then we could have something to work with going forward.
Tom, go ahead.
That's actually the question we started the operations work group sessions with, and we had a really good discussion about it, and that might be a good sort of prompt. If we start off with the whiteboard that we had from the operations work group, say this is what 2 years ago we thought a good meeting looked like. Has it changed, or what should we add?
All right. Are we in agreement that we will revisit this as a question for the next board meeting? Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
To build on what Tom said, also 2 years ago, we had a lot of discussion in an operations work group about participation and engagement. How do we get more participation? How do we get more engagement? And there were sticky notes and things that got written up on the whiteboard about that too.
Okay, so I'm hearing two different paths. Actually, maybe three. One, put together a small working group to take the results of the survey and see what we can do to identify the nuggets that can be implemented. I'm also hearing do a new survey. And I'm hearing form an ops working group, a task force, whatever, to move out. And that's in addition to starting the next meeting with the new question. Totally agree. So does anybody have any real strong feelings one way or the other?
Do you have strong feelings, Chris?
I like the small works group idea, but with different people
Yes.
than were on the previous work
Right.
group.
I agree.
And if you do go that route, I think the first step would be to totally ignore the summary here and have that small work group take a look at it and see if they come up with different things. If they would summarize it differently and have identify a different suite of issues or problems perhaps than this as a path forward that they could then go on.
Okay, so are you saying the summary or the results, the surveys? I mean, okay, because I know. Okay, because what I'm hearing is the people that do not want to throw out the surveys that were completed and the results of the surveys of
I
those
think
11
I think what we're looking at is an engagement work group, not an operations work group, because the operations work group had a set scope to look at documents, and this is a set scope to look at engagement and sort of how we feel about ourselves as a board. So So it's less of an operations work group and more of a, you know, a sunshine committee or morale group.
And I'll note that we are at 2:15 or past it. Larry, what are your thoughts?
I don't think we should abandon the survey. A lot of work went into it, both in creating the survey and in people filling it out. But I agree that there should be a group, probably a small group, an IM team that should modify that and come back with the beginnings of some recommendations.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, Larry's right.
Okay, so I think we have an agreement on a small group to come back with recommendations, which would also look at the existing survey results and come back to us maybe the next board meeting in September with something. And then the next key question is, who's volunteering? Come on, not everybody jump at once. Okay. Amber, Rob Parmalee, Mia, Risa. Okay. 4 people, okay? I got you, Amber. Yep. Thank you. Oh, Larry too. All right, great. So we got Amber, Rob Parmalee, Mia, Risa, and Larry. All right,
and who is
You good?
leading this effort?
we got a path forward. Success. Moving on. Thank you, everybody, very much.
All right, thank you. We'll schedule that offline. Our next item is the status updates on previous HAB action items. I'm going to hand this off to Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. So the first item on the list is the status of discussions on the land acknowledgement. So conversations are still happening between the Hanford Tribal Office and the tribes, and an update will be provided when available. There's no update to share at this time. And Sue or Mia, do you want to take the lead on the path forward for the issue manager team working on the recommended path forward for how you would like to see alternates?
IM team. But real quick, knowing that everybody, all the tribal people, tribal associated people are down at Stigwig down south today, this week, is there any chance that there'll be some evolution of action on the land acknowledgement statement based on that meeting?
I don't believe so.
Okay, they're all down south.
Okay. Yeah, no update to share from the tribal office.
Thank you. So the ESC, the leadership committee decided to begin an IM team on the topic of alternates and what the role of an alternate is. So we are meeting May 15th. I am the lead of the IM team. If any of you all want to join, I think that's always open for you to hop on if you weren't part of that ESC call. I don't know what time, May 15th. Josh, if you know by any chance.
I'll bring that up and let you know in a minute.
Thank you. But we're going to be kind of gathering everyone's thoughts and then working on advice on the topic of alternates.
Okay, so that is Wednesday the 15th from 10:30 to 11:30. And so I suppose with that, our next topic is committee reports. Who would like to lead us off on those? Rebecca.
So the LIDS committee met, what is this, May? Is this May? I think we met in March. We had a presentation from the individuals who came. One was I think traffic engineer, and the other one from the Hanford Site Traffic Safety Committee. They came and gave a short presentation on infrastructure and the traffic safety briefing. We discussed the issue after after our presenters left and decided that we were going to go through and try to update uh, what was it, the advice that we had written, I believe, in 2019. Richard is the is the issue manager for that particular traffic safety advice. I'm not sure how much of it has gotten any real groundwork on it. We were waiting for the engineering study that they talked about in the presentation, which was sent to all of us. And I've read through portions of it. And Richard and I talked about it yesterday. He'd also read through some portions of it. We have some questions. So yeah, there were a few people who volunteered. I'm not sure if you, Rob, but who volunteered to be on that issue manager team. So that is still forthcoming. It's a never ending problem. So it's not like something that's, imminent. It has to be done like tomorrow, but it's always, it's always an issue, the traffic safety for the Hanford site. So, also we had talked about, um, interest in the Workforce Engagement Center, which I think I saw on here. There's going to be a topic later on the agenda. So, believe that's it. I don't know. When is our LIDS committee? Is it next month? It's in June.
June 3rd, most likely in the morning.
Okay, June 3rd. I've lost track of like what month it is even. I don't know. I don't know why. I can't believe it's May already. I don't know. So anyway, thanks to everybody who has come and shown up to the LIDS meetings and for your participation. And I was hoping that Richard would be here, but he's wearing two hats today. So if you do have any questions about that, Richard would be a good person to get a hold of, to talk to, and more will be forthcoming on that. So thank you.
All right. Who would like to give the next one? Rob?
So we've had a real busy time. Last month, committee meeting, we had 2 presentations. We also had some good healthy discussions. The first presentation basically had to do with Matt Irwin from DOE came in and talked to us about the LAW or DF Law facility. That's the low-level waste melter. He reported to us that during their startup activities, they run into a couple problems. One of the problems was some air leakage. They solved those problems. They applied the answers, solutions over to the Melter 2. Melter 2's been energized, and that's a good thing. They were a very good thing. They also had a small cooling water leak on a cooling panel that turned out to be just simply a manufacturing error, not a quality error. So so that was discussed a little bit. Also, we have a big target date coming up with the LAW DF Law facility, and that's the Environmental Performance Demonstration Test. And that basically, once they get the entire gas cleanup train working and functioning, they will then stimulate it with some unknowns and seeing how well it cleans up. And that performance test is done just before the ORR, or operational readiness review, which is all scheduled for coming up this by the end of this year. So we're very much looking forward to that. Matt agreed to come and talk to us if there's any changes, and they're pretty excited about the progress that's being made at the DF Law facility. We also had a presentation on the system plan, system plan 10. Some things to note about the system plan that, it turns out the holistic negotiations and the system plan don't really match. And I'm having real problems with the aspect of the holistic negotiation saying is that they won't repeat the system plan every 3 years as that is required. And they're going to extend parts of it up to 6 years. And I just see that not having it consistent for the system plan to be issued every 3 years is something that won't allow us input into and help with, we won't see where corrections are needed. One thing in the system plan that seemed real good, they came out with, another thing is the confusion between the FFRDC report with some 19 different options to the system plan 10 with 8 different options with et cetera, et cetera. It just seems like all we're doing is studying options and not using our heads and saying, well, this is just unrealistic. We'll never get the money for this option or whatever, and just remove it from these lists. But he seemed to, John Fleming, who was the mission integration manager, is the one that gave us the System Plan 10 discussion. It was a very, very good discussion. We learned a lot, and we felt pretty good on that. I think that what they're looking at, and I think what the holistic discussions had concluded by reading the presentation we had yesterday, was that it looks like the phased approach option or phased startup is the one which would be option number 2 in the system plan. What else? Dan McDonald made some interesting observations on the system plan, pointing out that there's was over 300 assumptions made in the system plan. The system plan, if you look at it, they do talk about their assumptions and they do list them, but he was real concerned that many of these assumptions is fill in the blank. So it's not well researched out yet. Another source where we had another hierarchy of different options for the Hanford site was the AOA, or the analysis of alternatives. And each one of these, I think they're supposed to be to help guide us in a way to go, but there are too many of them. Almost, they're not consistent. They need to, I feel that they really need to kind of blur these together and give us really what they think. What is the option they're going to pick? And this is also something that we need to remember, that they just got through signing a contract for the Hanford contractor for a 10-year period at something like, what was it, $45 billion over the next 10 years. So it's a big project, huge project. We had a good committee discussion. We talked about a lot of things, double shell tanks. We had some folks from Warps, Warps. They came in and talked a little bit about the structural integrity of the tanks, the double shell tanks. So altogether, it was a very good meeting. And actually, sitting here thinking about what constitutes a good HAB meeting for me is really good presentations from DOE on what they're doing, and I really appreciate it. And so that leads me to teasing what our next month's committee meetings are going to be. We have a riveting discussion on TBI, and it will allow us to really look at the TBI and its alternatives. And then the second one is that we had requested earlier that we get a more detailed discussion on the AMPS system, which is the upgraded applied TISCR. So both those discussions will be forthcoming. I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a lot of things that we would like to include in our meetings, but we basically only have a half a day. And so we try to cram them full. So, and I think, thanks, Lindsay. You've been just a good sport on being patient with us, and especially me, and giving me the opportunity to go into areas that are kind of technical. All right, thank you.
And our next two chairs are online. We have Tom and then Michelle. Tom, go ahead.
Okay, so CARM met in April. Was it April? No, in March. And we had briefings on the 100K basin cleanup. And they're getting ready to dewater the basin, and then they're going to fill it with grout and clean that out and sample below it. So that should be happening soon. That's exciting. We had an update on the records of decision or proposed plan process for 100K and 100N areas. Both of those documents should be coming out for public comment at the end of the calendar year or by the end of the calendar year. And there will be two comments periods that are probably going to be staggered, but they might overlap a little bit, I think, is what the general consensus was. We then had a sort of regulator perspective topic where EPA and ecology just went sort of down the river corridor and hit on a couple topics that they were watching that didn't necessarily need a whole PowerPoint presentation. It was more just a discussion of where the sites were that don't have a lot of reporting right now, but there is action happening, which is good. We had elections. We did not have anyone nominated for vice chair, and we still have that nominations open. So if you are interested in running for vice chair of CARM, tell facilitation. We also, then in April, we had a quick joint call with LIDS and CARM to approve the transuranic advice out of committee. And in June, I think we're meeting in the afternoon on Monday, June 3rd. And everyone's homework is to come up with topics they want on the work plan for next fiscal year. So come prepared to bring the projects that you want us to be able to talk about and advice ideas. And then also, yeah, like I said, if you're interested in being vice chair, we have an open position.
And finally, Michelle.
Okay, mine's going to be short and sweet because I was not able to participate in our last committee meeting. So I am a little behind on knowledge for the Public Outreach and Communications Committee. I do know that Tom has been leading an IM team that maybe I could ask him to give an update on those efforts briefly. And as far as leadership is concerned, we are still in the process, I believe, of identifying both chair and potential vice chair candidates for the committee as well. Tom, I'll give it back to you.
Okay. So yeah, there's an IM team out of COE that's informally known as the IM team of three parts. We're working on some draft advice to the TPA agencies on best practices for comment periods that don't have a legal obligation for response. And there's a draft of that document circulating. We're going to have a call sometime in the next couple weeks to see about getting that to the June committee meeting for COE. Then Mia has been taking the lead on reading back through all of the old HAB advice to sort of do a book report on the status of public outreach with respect to former advice and, how have we improved, where's the areas of continual improvement that we could potentially do advice on. And then the third piece is looking at somehow developing a curated sort of Hanford University YouTube channel where all of the 101 documents or presentations that have been done over the years about CERCLA and RECRA and DF law could be a one-stop shop for people who are either coming onto the board or interested in Hanford. So it's a busy IM team, and we're going to be sort of dribbling out content over the next couple meetings.
All right, thank you. So their final item on the agenda is HAB Administrative Business. Two of the items related to the community outreach engagements, leadership elections, as well as the Cleanup and Risk Mitigation Committee vice chair elections, which we both sort of covered. If you're interested in nominating yourself or someone else, please send those to hab@slind.net. That's SLIND.net. And I'd like to hand it off to Sue to discuss a proposal around leadership terms and start dates.
Okay, so in your package, you should have noticed a one-page proposal to change the dates of our elections for chair, vice chair, and national liaison. What it is the proposal is to line up the term period for those three, for the three HAB leadership positions, which are 2-year terms, to coincide with the membership term. What it does is eliminate a potential gap as it is today, which was pre-term limits implementation. We have the potential for electing someone for one of those three positions in the January, February timeframe, and that person rolling off the board on September 30th. Not saying it's ever going to happen, but there is that potential. So this will kind of clean up that situation, and that way our term limits would all be for all the committees as well as, which we've already taken care of, and for the board leadership would all be October 1 to September 30 for our positions. And this is not talking about when we would hold elections. This is strictly the term period.
Go ahead,
So
Ryan.
does anybody have any thoughts, issues, concerns? I think Mia and I tried to lay out all the questions that might be had or the requirement drivers. I'll take approval, but I don't have to have approval. I mean, it's a case of somebody has questions or concerns, the floor is open.
Yeah, Susan, I was just going to note, I think from the business side of it, or the action side, I think we're only at 13 or 14 people right now, just for
Yeah.
awareness.
So we don't have enough for consensus if we don't. If we need 16. I'm gonna say this isn't even covered in the ground rules. The requirement that talking to the positions in the ground rules is strictly the 2-year term, which we're not impacting. So this is kind of outside of it. Pardon? I think as we operate as a consensus decision-making board, I think it's a good business practice. I mean, I'm not going to play dictatorship and unilaterally say, we're going to do this. No, I would rather have consensus. Brisa.
I was just going to say that I support your suggestion. I mean, it makes total sense to me. No objection here.
Are we saying that we don't need a consensus vote because this is considered a minor issue?
So I would think that because what we're doing is the group would be recommending a chair forward for essentially for another half a term.
Well,
that would require consensus because it would extend the term past January 1st.
Okay, so okay.
Yes, my recommendation would be to move this this topic to the September board meeting and then have it addressed early on when we have a lot of folks in the room. Susan?
Josh, scroll it up to the bottom section where the actions needed. All right, so there's 3 actions that need to happen. Consensus by the HAB members to change the term start end date. Second one, that is agree to extend the current HAB chair, vice chair, and national liaison from where we currently expire at the end of January to September 30th. So to me, I'm treating these as separate actions. Because then the third one, because according to the OGR, I have to be the chair has to be formally appointed by the agencies. The agencies also have an action that they would need to extend me to the end of the year. So I'm treating it as a consensus decision. I'm not, I'm a conservative person overall. Whether we are required to have a consensus, I'm open to discussion. But it isn't something that has to be done today. It's something we can do at the September meeting because we're early enough in the process. Because I and Pam will not roll out of positions until the end of January 2025. We have a little bit of time. Yes.
Start with Jacob.
Okay, so if I recall.
Mike, Rob.
I believe the reason why we initiated it was that we would compile something, get it to Lindsay. Lindsay would have to talk to Kelly Snyder to see if it's acceptable that we change those limits. Is
we're
that
not
right or
talking-
wrong?
We're not talking term limits. We're talking about the appointment time period for the HAB chair and the vice chair. So that is done at the local level.
Right, but the idea that we're going to now advance somebody's term limits beyond what the normal 2-year term limit is something that they have to comment on.
No.
No.
No. So the recommendation comes from the board to essentially extend. So what Susan's asking for on the second bullet is
Yeah.
to extend the current chair. So what that does is the board may have to make that recommendation to extend Susan and Mia's term.
Right.
And I believe the vice chair can be appointed by the board, but the chair position comes forward as a recommendation to the tri-party agencies. And so the board would need to make that recommendation that, yes, they would like to move their terms to begin on October 1st.
Right.
And then secondly, they would like to see Susan continue to serve past her initial end date at the end of January through 9/30/2025, which is why I recommended that because of that piece of it, which
Right.
is typically done by consensus at that full board meeting level, that we should wait till September. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Though you're confident we'll get a rubber stamp on that saying, okay, we'll agree with that.
What do you mean I'm confident?
That the tri-parties will allow the appointment to exceed the normal appointment time by 9 months.
So I would need to take that recommendation back. I can't give you an answer right now.
Right. But you're pretty confident that'll be rubber stamped.
I don't have an answer right now, Rob.
Okay. So we don't have this for sure.
We don't have me for sure. The potential impact here is we as a board, if we had, under a consensus decision, so ideally September, we could move the start end dates. We could vote to move the chair, vice chair, national liaison, extend their terms. But ultimately, the agencies have the authority to say yes or no, whether I continue on until September 30th as your chair.
I kind of was under the impression that we first run it by them to make sure they're consistent with this approach. But it sounds like we're just rolling the dice. And if they accept it, they accept it. If they don't, we go without
That's why I
a
said-
chair for 9 months.
Well,
Okay.
as I said, number 3, if not, an election would need to be held, for an interim or acting chair from January 31st, 2025 to September 30th, 2025 to cover the transition period.
And
So
I believe that the
that's-
other option that was brought forward at the ESC meeting was potentially having a new term start this September. Or I'm sorry, October 1st.
Okay, so we,
Chuck, you're up and down.
It gets answered, then it's a new question, then it gets answered. And I guess in my mind, what I'm thinking is you're going to have, there's hoops out there to be jumped. Action one is not a big hoop. That's just, we could do it right now and start the hoop jumping process. Because I would think, Lindsay, if you knew that, well, yeah, at least there's 12 people that say yay verily, I should start priming the folks and tell them to expect in September, they're going to see this. Because I know that seems like a long time, but it's not. My experience, just getting appointed here is, I was appointed in January, didn't get approved till October kind of thing. So I'd like to jump through any hoops we can jump through today and get it done with. And then go in the September. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'd like to reiterate that acceptance of a chair is done at the local level. It is not done at the headquarters level. Jacob, you look like you're tipping a card.
Is the reason we can't vote on this today because we don't have a quorum? Is that it's possible that in the building we have enough people to have a quorum? If we had someone go and round them up and say, can you come here for a consensus vote?
by my last count, we had 13 people in the room and online, and I only know of 2 people who are also in the building.
Richard.
Sorry. Amber did dial in since my last count. We're up to 14. Jacob?
Amber is on mine.
Yeah, of course, we don't want to do that if we think there's someone who's going to vote no, but we'd also probably like to know that.
While we wait for that, do we want to look at the other administrative business? Okay.
Okay, the other item was anyone interested in the tour of the Hanford Worker Engagement Center? I know we've talked about this a few times in the past. Has it solidified and does anybody have an expressed desire? All right, so we got Dan and we've got Mia. And Rob Parmalee, sorry. Is that a yes? Okay. Josh, you want to coordinate that?
All right.
I don't know who the point person is for that.
So that would be the department. We'll take the lead on that. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for Becky, but because didn't she express an interest in that? So you'd probably just make sure you add her to that too.
Yep. And then the last item is calendar review and upcoming meetings. I'm about to your side of the table.
All right. So as we discussed during committee reports, we are anticipating 4 committee meetings in early June, most likely LIDS and CARM on Monday, June 3rd, most likely Twist and Co. on Tuesday, June 4th. After that would be the leadership workshop on June 5th. Should nominations come forth for Co or CARM, they will also be invited to that. So please mark your calendars accordingly. Then July, We have no meetings in July typically. And but we have confirmed a committee of the whole date for August 5th. This was rescheduled from one that showed up on the initial calendar in April, followed by another 4 committee meetings. And the highlight is September. On the 10th and the 11th, we are planning a full board meeting in Spokane, most likely at the Davenport Centennial Hotel. We are finalizing room booking details, and the deadline for booking those rooms will probably be well ahead of those meetings. So please keep an eye out and HAB happenings for any related announcements. Okay. I will double check for a quorum, so I'll be silent for just a moment.
No, we're not, but I'm always open to asking. Thanks, Rob.
We're at 14.
It's 17 because it's half of the board plus 1.
We are one of those really strange situations. The OGR says 1/2 the board. Okay, what we're trying to do is get quorum so we can decide on the changing the term dates for the chair. Thank you.
Salt from the repository in New Mexico. So Lindsay, can I say something? I talked to Pam earlier and she had lunch with the director of WIP and he gave her a sample of salt, and I'll pass this around for people to look at.
Very cool. Thanks, Larry.
She was just floating on air. She was so happy.
Josh. Yeah.
Oh, Chris, go ahead.
This was a question for either Sue or Lindsay. What's the status of our operating ground rules that we sent to EM headquarters for approval? I haven't heard anything one way or the other.
They're still under review. We appreciate your patience, Chris.
And Lindsay, as long as we're on the roll of complaining about things, when did you guys come up with these dumb things, right? What happened to pencil and paper? It's your fault.
It's always my fault. Darn those iPads. I hope you brought a charger.
We're at 15. John Smart was being counted for West Richland.
Oh, I got bad intel. That's all right.
Sorry, but
Yeah, I didn't see her. Yeah, I thought she walked out earlier, and I don't know if she was just leaving shortly or not, but I looked around the room and didn't see her.
I think we're at 16.
Yep, we've got 16 with folks online.
Making the change of the term start and end dates for HAB chair, vice chair, and national liaison, changing the term of service from starting on October 1st to end on September 30th. Does anyone object? Everybody can live with it. We good? Thank you. Okay, so do we want to do part two? Hold on. Do we want to do part two? Agree to extend the current HAB chair, vice chair, and national liaison current terms to end on September 30th, 2025 to allow for the transition of the new term periods. Okay. And then action 3 is in the agency's ballpark. And this will not take effect until September 1st or October 1st, 2025. So that means your leadership will continue in place until that point. Thank you. We're good. We good?
Sounds like we have achieved a consensus on all points. And that concludes the HAB administrative business as I know it. Is there anything else we need to cover to close out this item?
All right, great work, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.
Can I say something just really quickly? Jacob, we are going to miss you. Thank you so, so much for your service on the HAB, all of your pointed questions and takeaways committee meetings, and your sharing your perspectives. You've all made us better board members and more knowledgeable. So we would don't want you to be a stranger. You can still ask all your questions as a member of the public in committee meetings and IM team meetings. So please don't forget about us. And we are so grateful for everything you've contributed.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mia, and everybody.